Welcome to Agile to Agility Podcast with Milan Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this another level.
You'll have to, I think,
Just unmuting myself.
okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Sorry, I've got a crazy situation with multiple monitors at the moment. Kind of a new setup. Okay, so thanks for joining. I hope you enjoy this session. It's really going to be picking up off of what we were just talking about in the group discussion about how do you make this kind of work visible? How do you get started? How do you bring everybody in and share the same view of what is contributing to your biggest challenges and where are you going to find the next breakthrough that improves performance? So part of that is working together, and I'm going to show you a method that I've successfully used for a few years now that really makes that accessible to folks. It is remote friendly. There's a lot of resources available that I'll share afterwards, and you can get started right away. So let's get started with that. So my name is Steve Pereira. I work with the Value Stream Management Consortium. I run a company called Visible Value Stream Consulting because I really care about visibility. And I also work with a company called Capato on their value stream management strategy. So I've been in this value stream space for a couple of years, but I come from build and release engineering, automation, and really working to make flow happen in organizations. So one of the things that I think is kind of foundational to establish right away is that and goes to this point about visibility is that a lot of the efforts that we're trying to undertake, a lot of the things that we're trying to do as organizations fail because there's a lack of clarity. And we've had a lot of work put in this direction over the years, a lot of data that is pointing to clarity and really fundamental understanding and collaborative understanding as a major contributor to challenges, because in knowledge work, clarity is everything, right? Misunderstanding can set you down the wrong path. And one of the books that I'd recommend everybody check out is Karen Martin's Clarity First book, because she's really established this connection between a lack of clarity and issues in organizations. So let's look at a typical case. I'm going to frame this in the context of a little bit of a start to finish example of how we tackle some of the common challenges that you'll see across different environments. So in your typical organization, you have a giant backlog of changes, right? Everybody wants a million things done. You need to go faster in order to get those things out the door. And whether it's delivery or just getting feedback, you really want to cut lead time. You want to make sure that everything is going as fast as possible. That's part of why value streams are so compelling, is we really can start to look at the end-to-end picture of what's happening and how we accelerate. And so the question becomes, how do we actually do that, right? And this how speaks to a couple of different levels of flow. Like when I think about primarily what most folks are focused on is this collective flow, the organization, which brings us to the value stream, that series of activities that are happening that encompasses all the activity, but also the delay and the waste and the friction, the dependencies that interfere with the flow of work and the delivery of value. But also important to note here is that there's a personal aspect to this. So when you have a value stream that's operating effectively, you're enabling individual contributors to actually experience personal flow, right? If you don't have to worry about waiting for answers, feedbacks, capabilities to be accessible to you, if you can do what you need to do in order to make progress, you fall into that state of joy that we associate with the flow state, right? And that really can't happen unless you have this collective flow, right? If you're not in a value stream, if you're not in a functioning workflow, then you're constantly going to be interrupted. You're constantly going to be waiting for things. You have to be context switching all the time because, if you can't work on your primary objective, you're going to have to switch gears and work on the secondary priority because nobody wants to just sit around and do nothing. So I think this personal flow is really a byproduct of collective flow. I think that's what really makes it resonate with me, this idea of value streams unlocking our individual ability to get into and stay in a flow state. And that to me is really, valuable because all the time that I get to work inside of a flow state is it's incredible, right? It has this amazing feeling of progress and meaning to the work, as long as you're heading in the right direction. So one of the major challenges with this is that we don't work in isolation, right? We can't just put ourselves into a state of flow unless we can sort of go wander off into the wilderness and work alone, right? If we've severed all dependencies. But challenge is we work in teams, we work in large, complex organizations. And oftentimes that means that everybody's perspective is a factor, right? We're working with people who need to align and work in the same direction. We need to work together, but we all have different perspectives. So how do we tackle that? We also miss simple models for relating with the work and relating with other people who we need to collaborate with, right? The value stream, I think, at the very least, is this productive model of thinking about work and thinking about how work happens. And, we don't really have many other simple models like that to leverage. And we also know that we can't copy and paste, right? You can't just do what Spotify does. You can't just do what Amazon does. Your organization is unique. Your situation, your team is unique, even within your organization. So you need something that's sort of generated out of your environment that fits your environment. And again, the question is, how do you do that? So what I propose is that leveraging tools like what we're doing with Mural here in this event, we're able to collaborate on the same surface and generate these collaborative artifacts, this common understanding where everybody can see the same picture and develop the same understanding of what's happening and what we can do about what's happening. So I propose mapping is something absolutely critical for making progress with value streams, especially because this is a logical model we're using, right? A value stream doesn't actually physically exist in knowledge work. So mapping gives us a way of sort of pulling that idea, that concept out of our minds and creating the same image that we can reference, right? And we don't have to shoehorn that into someone else's understanding of what it should look like. We can generate our own picture of what it looks like for us, right? Your team can create their own pictures. And ideally, you create pictures that resonate with others, right? So you can share that image across an organization and have really productive conversations about what you're talking about, right? In very tangible ways. It's very difficult to have these sorts of conversations about logical models and abstract ideas, things that can be interpreted different ways without something to point to and have people say, okay, yes, I understand that, or I see it a little bit differently, and let me show you how I see it differently. What's even better is when you can attach data to all this, and we'll get into how you can do that in a number of different ways. So this practice of collaborative mapping really introduces a number of benefits that I find are very difficult to achieve any other way, right? Video conference calls, we can't just do those all day, every day. I think we figured that out during the pandemic. We really need some way of making these discussions and interactions productive. And you could do this, remotely, of course, but you can also do this in person. So as people are going back into the office, you really just need any kind of surface and post-it notes or a whiteboard or whatever you like. You can do this on the back of a napkin if you wanted to. All the same principles apply. So when we're starting this practice, one of the questions that I always get beyond when to do this, which is today, That's a quick answer for you. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but um, you can really do this anytime. And I think, times when things seem particularly challenging or especially good times to tackle something like this. But, if things are going extremely well and you're looking for the next advance, if you're looking for the next opportunity, then of course, that's an opportunity as well. But who participates is really a measurement of what's happening in the value stream. So you can define your value stream, and I'll get into how you can sort of start to draw those boundaries. But we really want everybody sort of involved and affected as part of this practice, right? So it helps to have an executive sponsor. They can move things out of the way for you. They can get you budgetary approval in some cases. They can help you make time for improvements. And they can help also surface learning and success to the rest of the organization, right? It goes a long way to have a leader kind of involved, because they get this understanding, sort of direct understanding of what's happening. And they can ask questions and get answers and get a feel for what's happening in the value stream. So I suggest, trying to involve leaders wherever possible, but at the very least, you definitely want representation from who's contributing to the target outcome, who's contributing to the status quo, who's a part of what's happening today. So the first thing that I like to do with teams, and this sort of arose out of value stream mapping because I started with value stream mapping and I got really excited about it. And I started seeing a lot of success with value stream mapping. And the challenge would always be, okay, how do we pick a value stream? How do we draw the boundaries of a value stream? And one of the most important things with value stream mapping is having a clear objective, a clear goal that you're pursuing. Otherwise, you don't really know what data to collect, what granularity is going to be valuable. It's difficult to size the effort and get everybody to sort of focus on what we're really trying to get out of the value stream map, right? You could map anything at any level of detail. And if you don't know why you're mapping, it's really difficult to say when you're done. It's really difficult to say what should be on the map. So starting from a target outcome became kind of my next obsession. How do we pick a clear target, and how do we make sure that everybody involved sort of really understands it and understands it enough that we can move forward with confidence and clarity, right? This is getting into this challenge of clarity very, very directly. I was going to say clearly, but I'll say directly. So let's say, we have a target outcome. We want to go faster. We want to reduce lead time. And, this could be about improving velocity, but hopefully it's about learning faster, right? Getting response from customers, getting faster feedback so that we can pivot more often and adjust our work. The next thing that we really want to understand is why. Why do we want that, right? Because there's different reasons. There's different reasons for customers. There's different reasons for the organization, different reasons for individuals involved. Nobody's going to put it on the board that they want a promotion, but we can also represent things like, we're trying to improve automation so that we can focus elsewhere, or we're trying to get more feedback from customers, or we're trying to make decisions based on feedback. So the faster we can get feedback, the more quickly we can make those decisions. There's all kinds of reasons why we want this outcome, and that context is really valuable. I also put this on the left because the whys really drive the outcome, not the other way around, right? The whys are the reason that the outcome exists. I think it's funny, people always talk about why first, but really you don't have a why unless you have a what. So starting with the outcome, that thing that we want, we can sort of understand after that point, okay, why is that so important? Why should this deeply resonate with us? And why should we really dedicate our time to it? Why is this more important than everything else that we could focus on? I think all that context is really valuable to folks and really helps anchor our conviction that we're going to drive towards this outcome with as much focus as possible. So the next thing that I like to surface is obstacles, because I think there's always insights from the team on, why isn't this done yet? Why aren't we already there? And it's usually because of obstacles. It's usually something is in our way or holding us back, and understanding what those things are, getting them out in front of everybody and having maybe conversation about, what are those challenges that we do see? What are the things that are in between us and our target outcome? We can plan to avoid them. We can create mitigation techniques or methods or measures to try and move around those. So I think that's really important. And the next thing is investigations. That's about, how do we most effectively get to the outcome? How do we most effectively avoid the obstacles? So the step after mapping the outcome is really digging into the value stream and understanding, what is the current flow? What are we currently doing that is performing at the status quo? Because we're trying to improve the status quo. So simplified example here, but really the core aspects of a value stream that I'm primarily interested in, and the basics, are understanding the time it takes to perform each activity, and then the delay that's happening between those activities. And this doesn't have to be a complicated visualization. This is usually as complicated as it gets to start with. And we can layer on other levels of detail here as desired, right? Depending on our target, we might be interested in value-added time. How much time do we actually get to create things or build things that are satisfying our customers? How much of the time is just sort of setting up environments, waiting for things to happen? You could also be measuring quality, right? If you have a value stream where you get to the end and everything gets thrown back to development because it's not to spec, then it's very valuable to sort of surface that and visualize that in the value stream, because that's how you're going to address it. So you could be measuring things like percent complete and accurate for each activity. You could be visualizing those actual throwbacks, and I've done that many times in the past, and that kind of helps everybody see very clearly what is happening in the value stream. So the next thing that we do is sort of use that data to find a focal point. And that's usually where you see significant delays, things that seem to be taking longer than they should, or areas of the value stream that disproportionately occupy a large portion of time. And that allows us to then focus on a point in the value stream and dig a little bit deeper, right? So the next thing that I like to do is dependency mapping. So we can take that focal point in the value stream, dig into it, and find out, what's contributing to the delays here, what's contributing to the time that we spend in this area of the value stream. And so in this case, we can see that we have a data team, we have a DevOps team. The DevOps team is probably manually standing up environments, or they're just answering tickets and maybe firing off some automation, but the team can't do that directly. So that dependency is actually weighing on the flow in the value stream. It's adding friction to the flow in the value stream. And we can understand through those dependencies, what are the actual capabilities underlying those dependencies. So digging deeper allows us to kind of debug the value stream and understand, what can we actually do about this? And so those individual capabilities that are underlying the areas of the value stream that are linked to dependencies brings us to the capabilities that those dependencies are providing. And so if we were going to break or mitigate those dependencies, we would need to adopt or improve those capabilities within the team. And so capability mapping allows us to do that. We can target this subset of capabilities and evaluate where we are with those capabilities and where we might need to get to in order to address the dependencies. So what I like to look at, first of all, we talked a little bit about ownership before. I'm kind of obsessed with this idea of ownership because I don't think things happen unless there's an owner, unless there's clear ownership. It's very difficult. If it's everyone's job, it's no one's job, right? If everything is top priority, nothing is a priority. So we can look at these capabilities and understand, okay, well, maybe the reason why we're not making any progress with this, or we have such a hard time, is that we don't actually have an owner for this. Nobody actually owns this capability. So at least, even if you're not bringing capabilities into the team, if you have an owner, that person can act as a liaison for the dependency and work to most effectively interact with that dependency. So at the very least, having ownership, I think, is very powerful for that purpose. But also, what we want is we can't just have one person who's responsible for something. They need support. We need a backup. If that person wants to go on vacation, everything can't just grind to a halt. So in the service of flow, in the service of continuity, we want to make sure that we have a backup for all of these capabilities. Then we can evaluate our skill level. Where are we with this thing? Are we able to fully execute this end to end on our own if we had to? If we were to break the dependency tomorrow, if we were given access to everything that we need access to execute on this capability, could we do it? Where would we stand in terms of skill? Do we maybe need training to bring ourselves up to a level where we could say, yeah, we can actually take that on now, or we can demonstrate our ability to execute that within the team? Resources actually points to a lot of different things. I like to think of resources as anything from documentation to a full self-service platform. But anything that enhances our ability to execute on a capability is something I consider a resource. And then finally, we sort of add all that up and try to understand where we are with each of these capabilities. And that allows us to focus on the gaps. And maybe it's, we choose to focus on where we're least capable, or maybe we focus on where we're most capable and try to drive that up to the point where we can break a dependency, right? Maybe we're close to breaking a dependency and we just need to fix something like ownership or resources, right? Maybe we just need to put the final touches on a minimal platform that allows us to internalize something. So what happens once we do all this discovery, right? We've unveiled or revealed a lot of information about how the team is currently operating in a value stream context, right? We're understanding the obstacles, the target outcome to a high degree. We have clarity on what's affecting the value stream. We understand the dependencies that are involved, because there usually are. It's not guaranteed, but usually you're seeing the cause of delays and the cause of waste is significant dependencies. And then you're also seeing, what could we possibly do about those dependencies? What are the capabilities we may be lacking? So then I like to make a roadmap, because just like having owners for things happen when you have a roadmap, when you have a clear plan of action, when you have clear next steps. So we look at a few things from a couple different dimensions. I like framing rather than time. I like now, next, and later, because, it doesn't assign any commitment to time. Maybe it's not possible to make estimations about when any of these things will be done. And we're usually terrible at estimation. So why bother, right? We can set priority. We can set a common understanding of roughly when things will happen and where the focus is at any given time by using something as simple as now, next, later. And you can use any number of different prioritization techniques for this. You can do weighted shortage job. You can do impact and effort. You can do cost of delay. Anything that you want to use for prioritization, you can bring to this. If you have a different format for road mapping, by all means, use that. I should say, actually, if you have a different way of mapping any of these things, use your way. The idea with this is just to give you a logical flow, a methodology for progressing from a target outcome to action. And any of those steps can be swapped in and out. Sometimes instead of a dependency map, I'll use something like a Wardley map. If I have a larger ecosystem to illustrate something a little bit more complex. But so to walk through this specifically, we're looking at clear milestones. These are just very, very simplified examples, right? But we want to understand, what are the milestones? What are we targeting? What do we hope to deliver? how are we going to understand our progress? How are we going to know that we're headed in the right direction so that in between now and when we deliver them, we can answer questions about like, how's it going, right? Or we can answer our own questions about how it's going at the very least. And then having ownership for that means that there's one point person who's on top of it, who's responsible for making sure that things are happening. And, ideally they're supported by the entire team, but having a point person, I think, is very important. So this is just a simple example, but, this can be scaled to whatever size or complexity is necessary under the circumstances. So some of the things that you sort of get out of this, I think a lot of organizations are really trying to move towards these models of agility and value stream performance. So if you take your typical Scrum team, what you're typically, and people will recognize maybe the team topologies notation here, but if you're not familiar, let's say, you have a data team, right? Your Scrum team has dependency on your data team. What happens there is that there's a delay, right? You might have a 48-hour SLA, you might have a 2-week SLA to get a response from that team. You fire in a ticket, who knows if they're ever going to even look at it. That team is probably firefighting constantly because they're responsible for supporting every other product team in the organization. And so, we have sort of this recipe for delay that is very common in organizations. And what we want to move to is things like platforms, right? Things like self-service that allow us to break those dependencies. And so if you have a platform that's developing, a platform team that's developing a platform, all of a sudden your streamlined team can leverage the platform directly. They don't have to wait on anybody else to help them. That platform team can be delivering the platform as a product at their own pace, on their own roadmap, satisfying streamlined teams as their customers. And the streamlined teams are able to operate at peak velocity, right? And I think it's really powerful. So we're going from a situation of dependency to a situation of self-service. We're also going from a model of firefighting to feature building. And I think that's incredibly powerful. So what do we see when we start to move in this direction? We start to see that more developers are supported and facilitated by fewer supporting staff. You're able to see time to repair dramatically decrease. You're able to see deployment frequencies rise. You're able to see lead times decrease. Anybody looking at trying to deliver on DORA metrics, everybody accountable for improving velocity, this is a recipe for moving in that direction. So to sum up here, and I'd love to get to questions, I will absolutely share these slides. Unfortunately, the slides probably won't have a build. I can maybe try and share the presentation itself, but what we're trying to do from the very start is be very clear on what we expect to achieve, understanding the flow of work currently and the delivery of value in its current state. We can do future state mapping to try and understand, what do we want this to look like? That's all included in value stream mapping. Dependencies help us understand a little bit more in depth what the constraints on the value stream are actually caused by, or the contributing factors to those constraints. We can look at capabilities as ways of breaking those dependencies, or mitigating those dependencies, or supporting those capabilities, or developing capabilities within the team to make them more autonomous. And then all this comes together with a flow roadmap where you're able to build a clear and actionable outcome artifact that's going to allow your team to kind of focus and all be on the same page. And all these maps can be shared across the organization. They could be shared up, they could be shared down, internally, externally, whatever you like. You have, a clear artifact that people can point to. You can have good discussions about you can use for future reference, or just to capture where you were at a specific point in time, come back to it later and understand your evolution as a team and an organization. So with that, I want to give you a little bit of reference material that's available. So I have an ebook and an email course that's 7 days through flow engineering at flow.visible.is. The vsmconsortium.org. I'm a board advisor there. We're doing a lot of really in-depth work on the state of value stream management and where value stream management is going. And we'd love to see you there and have more of these discussions. And I've been working on a video podcast with Andrew Davis, my co-author and colleague on value streams. And so we'd love to get you involved in that, listening, asking questions, being a part of that effort. But with that, I'll hopefully answer some questions.
Yeah, Steve, Diane has a question for you in the chat there first. Do you want me to read it or do you see it?
I think I see it. So Steve, can you dig into your scenario a bit with the platform team and how that platform team and platform can better enable the stream-aligned teams to be more self-sufficient? So yeah, sure. So when I think about a platform, I really think about like the prototypical platform is something like Heroku, where a team can actually stand up new environments. They can connect their code repositories. They can spin up instances of supporting services like databases and queues and anything that it would really take to sort of like host and deliver their application. It's also giving them metrics and analytics. It's giving them visibility into architecture and performance, and they're able to sort of manage all the costs for the infrastructure that is required to deliver their application or their suite of applications. That's kind of like the high bar. And the low bar is really like good documentation, or a very clear illustration of how to interact with a different team, right? Things like team APIs can be as simple as like, here's what we expect. If you jump in the channel, you have a problem, here's how to frame the problem. And here's what you can expect, right? You can expect a response within an hour. You can expect, an outcome within 24 hours. All is just clarity and definition that enables operations to be more self-service, right? Sometimes self-service is just like giving someone the confidence to do something where they know that they're doing the right thing and that they can actually count on getting a response or getting something in return. But I think that the prototypical platform in my mind is something like Heroku, and that exists internally. There's a big push towards internal development platforms. If you look at platformengineering.org or internaldevelopmentplatform.org, those are two efforts to kind of capture what like high capability platforms inside organizations actually mean and look like. I hope that answers the question.
Diane, please. Yep, it does. Great, thank you. There's a couple more questions. So maybe you can just go down, Steve, whatever's easier for you.
Sure. Let's see. Would you have the target based on the desired outcome, in brackets true efficiency, or would you design the target value stream for the apparent efficiency, more with less, based on what might be apparent? I'm probably going to interpret this a little bit off, but I think you always have a target outcome, and the value stream is second to the outcome, right? You have something that you want to achieve. Ideally, you have a customer outcome, but you also have business outcomes. The the value stream is really just like how you sustainably deliver on that outcome and the next outcome that's going to, be on the horizon. So starting from outcomes, I think, is extremely important. And, when you think about a startup versus a large enterprise, the reason a startup is able to do so much with so little and so quickly is that they take a target outcome and then they organize the entire organization around it. They're kind of like streamlined by default, and streamlined to a fault, maybe in some cases. But they always have a target outcome. They want to capture a portion of the Fortune 500, or they want one flagship client, and they're going to do anything it takes to get that one client, and they're going to organize themselves in order to achieve that outcome. The value stream sort of arises out of that. After you land that one client, what's it going to take to land the next 50 clients, and then how do we keep those clients happy? How do we get to 5,000 clients? That's what really should drive value stream evolution. But in most organizations, what happens is you have a target outcome as a startup, and then you create this like giant org chart, and everything gets sort of carved up by function because you have so many people trying to do so many things, and everybody forgets about stream alignment. But it really is available at any scale. If you look at organizations like Amazon, you can scale to any size and be stream aligned and perform at a much higher level than a sort of functional organization. So hopefully that sort of answers the question. I would say that, aiming for efficiency doesn't necessarily get you positive outcomes, because effectiveness matters more than efficiency. And you really have to make sure that you have efficiency where you're actually doing the right thing, which also points to being very clear about outcomes.
Steve, maybe just to go back before I forget, there was one question about how do you define resources? Like, if you could restate that.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people use resources to talk about humans, and I do not. When I think about resources, I think about things like good documentation, productive communication channels, access to things like service catalogs, being able to work with the code that's involved in any specific architecture, diagrams, reference materials, support. So things like being able to ask a question and get a good answer from someone who is qualified to give it. All of that I think of as resources. What is going to support your efforts? That's what I think of as a resource.
Great. So we have about, 7 more minutes. So I'll pick and choose, or maybe do the quick.
I've got a couple others we could try. I'll just read whatever I see that has a question mark on it, and we'll try and get to as many as possible.
Sounds good. So
how do you get leaders to align to be a part of the value stream? Do you ever perform smaller meetings to get, I'm assuming that's to get a smaller part of the value stream done, then get everyone together after the value stream is already mapped? So this really depends on the organization and the culture of the organization. In some cases, it's a big lift to get everybody in the same room, especially if you're the person with this wild idea of getting everybody together to figure something out. So you can always start by mapping your individual understanding and bringing that to a group and saying, here's something I put together. Like, what do you think? Does this map to your does this match your understanding? What am I missing? Are there any gaps that you can see in my illustration here? That can kickstart things. Usually people can't see the value stream, or there's very different opinions about where the value stream starts and finishes, what it is, what's the target outcome. So I think even as an exercise where you get a few folks together, people who are open to this idea, who maybe think about flow, who've talked about, maybe it's just people who complain about friction and delays, like how long everything takes. get those people together on, a lunch meeting where it's, really doesn't take a lot of time to get this sort of thing started. I should mention that most of these mapping sessions, like I cap them all at 3 hours, but they're all targeted at being about 2 hours to complete. We don't want a ton of detail. We don't want to steal people away from their jobs to do this thing that's, it's ultimately going to make their jobs a lot easier and more productive. But, we don't always have the, let's say, clout or social capital to spend on rallying the troops and getting everybody together. And I don't think you should have to do that. We should be able to make a compelling case by, maybe a simple illustration that says, all right, some data point where you're like, I think we should be able to deliver in less than 180 days. And I'd love to get some folks together to try and figure out how we do that. Let me see if I can see any others. Do you recommend personas, then customer journey mapping first, or value stream identification and mapping first? What is the ideal sequence in your experience, and at what time? What size? So that's a great question. I think if you're really looking for outcomes and you're really trying to deliver more valuable outcomes more consistently, then you really should have a strong understanding of who you're serving with the work that you're doing currently. That can point you to personas. It can also point you to, if you don't have direct connection with your customers, which most teams do not, then, your primary starting point, and I think, even more valuable in most organization cultures, is OKRs, right? What are the things that you're being measured on? What are the things that your teams are being measured on? If you can successfully accomplish those and make significant progress in those directions, you might get the authorization, you might get the okay to be more connected to customers and have a larger impact and actually work on things that matter more than satisfying OKRs. But I think that if the organization is asking you to deliver on X, Y, Z, that should be your primary focus. And until such point that you have enough influence or you've demonstrated enough success that you can go chase your own objectives or shape your own destiny to a higher degree. So to make that long answer short, I would say target things like OKRs. Get yourself some results with your primary objectives, because I think we can't ignore our current objectives in the service of making better value streams or making more productive value streams, right? Value streams are just a means to an end of delivering higher value, more sustainable outcomes. So, if you get good at that, if you get good at hitting your targets that already exist, then your next target can be, well, okay, to double down on what we just did, or to make what we just did a lot easier and more impactful or more scalable in the future, let's invest in value streams, because it's a way that we can more sustainably and predictably or effectively deliver on our outcomes, regardless of what they are. What if OKRs are disconnected in only one way? At that, I could use an example of. And yes, well-written OKRs are a topic for another day. I think OKRs are an entire event unto themselves, but super important, I think. I think it's really important to understand how you're being measured, because that really has a profound impact on what you should be doing and what's actually going to be perceived as success. And if your entire organization is talking about objectives and key results, and you start talking about value streams without connecting the dots, you're going to have a hard time.